Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy and in today's video I'm going to tell you how to write a novel even if you're a complete beginner. So if you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Lucy and I am currently working on getting my debut novel ready for publication. Last year I signed with a literary agent and I've actually been writing for well over 15 years since I was younger, and I have completed lots of books, but it's only with my most recent book that I managed to get an agent, and we're currently working on getting a publisher, and hopefully this book will come out and you can read it and hold it for yourselves. I feel like I'm in the stage with my writing journey where I feel like I have learned enough about the process that I feel like I can make this video. Another thing to bear in mind is I have worked in the publishing industry for over 10 years. I am currently working as a publicity director for a major UK publishing house, so I have experience on both sides, as an author waiting for her book to be published and also as an industry professional. So I really hope you enjoy this video and I do hope it's helpful. And this video will be structured into different parts of how you actually get a finished novel, from coming up with an idea to editing the final draft and everything in between. So make sure you stick around till the end of the video, as there's going to be lots of helpful tips in here. And if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So step number one, coming up with an idea. Before you can do any writing, you need an idea. Now, where do writers come up with their ideas? I mean, this is a huge question. Every writer will have a different answer for you. I really want to share some of my insights on how to actually get that winning idea that you can write a whole novel on. And that is also a sellable concept as well, because remember, if you are writing with the hopes of being a published author, your idea needs to be a concept that is sellable to publishers as well. So many authors start with different areas. Some authors come up with their stories based on a character. So this would be your main character, or a character in the book, maybe the antagonist, or it's maybe the hero. Some authors have this idea in their mind of this person who is leading the story. Some authors start with setting, their world. So if there is like a world that you're kind of envisaging, a political system, if it's fantasy or something like that, then some people start there and find that a really helpful grounding to then base their entire novel off. And then I feel like other writers like me, which I'll go into, start with the vibes, the emotions. Like, what is the message of the book that they are trying to portray through their words? Now, for me, how I get ideas is through many different mediums. So this is all my personal experience. But for example, where a few of my latest ideas for novels have come from have been songs. So if there is a song that just gives me a vibe, triggers an emotion in me that I'm like, I need to explore this emotion on the page somehow. And sometimes that has given me a kernel of inspiration there. It's also been movies. So my most recent novel that I'm currently working on, like currently writing right now, actually is inspired by, for example, the dynamic in Star Wars, the latest trilogy, of Kylo Ren and Rey, and the idea of kind of like a couple or kind of a romantic level of tension there, but ultimately that person ends up betraying you somehow. And it's like, okay, well, what would that feel like? What scenario would this play out in? That someone's really drawn to this dark person, this kind of evil person on the surface. Maybe they have a softer side, but ultimately that person may end up betraying them. There's something I really wanted to like play out there. The novel that I'm actually on submission for currently at the time of filming this, that I hope will find a home in a publishing house and you'll be able to read at some point in the next few years, that all started from my personal love of history and my love of the romantic poets in particular, especially the life and poetry of John Keats. So that was where I got the kernel of inspiration for that book. Really kind of the mixture of his life and John Keats's kind of like thirst for greatness. Also his belief that he would die without anyone remembering him, or really kind of his work being valued. And that really inspired my entire novel that I ended up writing and getting an agent with. So ideas can come from anywhere. And I think what's really helpful is to never force an idea. Usually, an idea comes from something that sparks an initial interest inside of you. And for example, sometimes you just need to do certain things to make yourself more susceptible to those ideas. I find going on a walk really helps, like just going on a long walk, listening to music by yourself, like something about solitude really opens you up to ideas as well. For example, that's why being in the shower and you suddenly get an idea, that's why it kind of works, because your brain is relaxing. I get a lot of my ideas just before I go to sleep. Now your brain is starting to relax, it's starting to shut down, and that is where I find that I'm daydreaming and I get a load of ideas that way. So I definitely would spend time brainstorming, but sometimes those kernel of ideas come at you when you least expect it. But I really recommend just taking time to not focus on getting an idea, but just taking time to brainstorm, to daydream. I think there's power in daydreaming, and it's often when you can come up with creative ideas that way as well. Once you have that little gem of an idea, try and broaden it out. Think about, okay, but what could this look like as a story? Really try and flesh that idea out, what resonates about that idea with you. And I think ask yourself a few questions like, why am I the right person to tell this story? Can I bring a different angle to it? Can I bring a different perspective or point of view? Who is the central character to that story, and why would they kind of be feeling certain emotions throughout this story as well? So I think the idea stage is the most exciting one. You can never force that, but I think what I really would recommend doing is keeping a notebook on you at all times, or your phone notes app, and I jot down ideas constantly. And I think for me, I'm always really inspired by history. So sometimes I'll get really obsessed with a period of history, and I just like type down in my notes app, like, you know, random ideas set in this era, look into this more. And it's just a prompt for me to go away and research that area of history, just to see if there's any gems of an idea there that I can kind of use as the basis of my next novel. Number 2, you have a great idea. Now, how do you actually get that idea down onto paper as a finished novel? So this is the outlining stage, and a lot of people choose to outline in very different ways. So I think no matter what style of outlining you do, I think some form of outlining is a good idea. So let me just break down the different types of outliners here. There are the plotters. Now, plotters are usually people who really enjoy a really in-depth outline. So that is writing down exactly what happens in each chapter, working out the different plot threads, the character beats, fleshing out everything. Now, I use a really helpful program called Scrivener for this. You will have heard of it. This is not sponsored by Scrivener, but I really would recommend their kind of system as well, because they do have templates of how you can outline a novel as well. And I've used them in the past to outline novels. Now, plotters are people who need to know where they're going in order to write. There are definitely pros and cons to this. I usually find with plotters, it's a great way of gearing up towards certain things that are going to happen in your novel. It's really good for kind of like, you know, executing very perfectly a certain plot thread or twist. However, it does leave little room for like that creative juice to flow. And sometimes, especially me, I know some people do feel quite constricted by that system. If you have a guideline telling you exactly where your novel's gonna go, and sometimes it doesn't work out like that and your mind just goes down a different path, that can be quite difficult in the actual writing of your novel. I would just play around with being a plotter and see if it works for you. If you're really struggling and you find it too constrictive, then maybe you are a pantser. A pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants and is someone who needs very little outlining at all. They just go. And I feel like I have always been a pantser at some stage of my writing career, because my first few novels, I did not outline whatsoever. I just wrote. I just wrote on vibes, and I just managed to get it all down. The negative side of being a pantser, which I've experienced multiple times because I'm really not a full-blown plotter, I'm definitely more on the pantser side, is that you usually hit the midway point, so halfway through your novel, and you're like, I don't know where to go from here. This is really not fun. So I think if you've got a very complex plot, it's not kind of more character driven. If you do have a central mystery, for example, I really would recommend being more on the plotter side. It really depends on the story you're trying to tell. If you are a pantser, make sure you have an idea-ish of like where you're trying to get to sometimes, because I do find that that helps. Which brings me to what I am, which is a plantser. Now, all these strange terms, I know, bear with me, but a plantser is somewhere between a plotter and a pantser. For me as a plantser, what I really recommend doing, and this after writing, I don't know, I'm kind of on writing my like 7th book right now or something, maybe 8th book. I've worked out the kind of key outline that works for me. And this is very, very basic. Basically sees me identifying what the beginning scene of my novel is. So what is the instigating incident? What is that kind of moment that catapults the reader on this entire journey? I also work out the midpoint, because that midpoint is a nightmare if you're being a pantser and you don't know where you're going. The baggy middle is a real thing. Avoid the baggy middle. That's where there's just not a lot of action happening. Always plot out a midpoint if you are somewhere between being a planner and a pantser. So I plot out the midpoint, and then I plot out the climax, like the big twist at the end, the big push and culmination of the entire story. So once I have those 3 beats, at beginning, middle and end, worked out of what is my story going to be like in those sections, I then do a chapter by chapter sentence outline. So this brings me very nicely onto a few different outlining techniques. Now, I'll leave kind of like resources of where you can find out more about these techniques, but one technique I have been using recently is called Save the Cat. Now, I'll pop a little grid on screen here, but Save the Cat is a kind of character emotional beat outline where basically you see that character's emotional story throughout the entire book. Now, I find this really helpful in order to see what the character has to go through, and this is mainly used in film and TV, I think, but it is really helpful for novel writing as well. So Save the Cat is one technique. I have actually used Save the Cat for my current book that I'm writing right now, which is really fun to do. So with Save the Cat, I will literally write where the chapters fall for each of those beats, if that makes sense. And I'll kind of write what happens on each of those beats. Another popular one is the 3-act structure. This is basically where you think of your novel as 3 separate acts. And I've used this in the past as well. It's super helpful. I usually do think of my novels as 3 acts, and I feel like that really helps. Just in terms of dividing the structure of the book, I find it also really helps with pacing as well, which is so important. So I really would, if you're a beginner, complete beginner, and you've never written a book before, or maybe you've dabbled but you've never finished a full novel, look into these different types of outlining tools. So whether you're recognizing who you are as a writer, whether you're a plotter, you're a pantser, you're a plantser, or looking into these outlining tools like Save the Cat, the 3-act structure. There are so many different ones that I can link down below, but I really would recommend just playing around with a few of these when you're outlining and seeing where you get to. Now, you have an outline, or maybe you don't if you're a pantser. It's time to start writing, and this is always the best bit, guys. Like, this is always the bit that creatively fulfills me so much. It's also the hardest part, and you are going to go through a myriad of emotions when you are at this stage, because the beginning might feel so exhilarating that you've got this incredible idea and you're gunning and you're ready to go. But there are certain things that you need to remember when you're writing. You need to find a method that works for you. You need to find out what type of writer you are. So do you get up early before work or school and write? Do you save it all for the weekends and just marathon out 5,000 words a day? You have to work out what your deadline is. And I think it's really helpful to have a self-imposed deadline when you are writing a first novel, because it just gives you a bit of structure, it gives you motivation, gives you something to aim for. And I think really work out, when are you going to write your novel? If you know you're a super busy person, you've got loads of other commitments, you need to carve out time to really get a novel written. And it does require some sacrifice. Like, I really hate to say that, because like, we all live such busy lives in this day and age, but you will have to sacrifice something if you do want to get those pages down. Whether that is that extra hour of sleep in the morning, whether that is a social plan on your Sunday or Saturday, whether that is, you know, watching TV or reading books in the evening, something will have to be shifted around, but you have to decide what's more important and what you're willing to kind of give up there. For me, I tend to block out my weekends when I'm drafting a novel. I love just having a free weekend and marathoning my writing. So I usually can write about 4,000 to 5,000 words a day during those weekends. So usually I will have written 10,000 words in a weekend, and I love doing it. It feels really motivating to me. I usually vlog it when I'm doing it, and it kind of gives me a little bit of accountability there. And speaking of accountability, another way to get a novel down is to join a writing course. The point of these courses is to learn about the craft of writing whilst also getting a novel out of it. So you are working towards a novel every single day you're doing the writing course, and hopefully you'll come out with a finished novel. So I'm currently taking the Reedsy online novel writing course, and this segment of the video is kindly sponsored by them. This is an incredible in-depth writing course where not only do you learn the craft along the way with weekday lessons, online lessons that are between 10 and 15 minutes each, so really digestible, and it's really easy to keep up with the program. Like, you are not there for hours. But what you are doing every day is writing your novel. So part of the course is that you actually write 1,000 words a day for 3 months, and at the end of those 3 months, you have a finished novel at the end of it. As I mentioned, in each week of the course, there are daily online lessons, and these cover every stage of the writing process. I found these videos hugely helpful. As I mentioned, they're really not long, they're really digestible, but they also use real life examples from published books to show you exactly how the craft looks in books that you know and love and are probably on your shelves. These videos can be watched in your own time, so if you're having a busy day or a busy week, you can always catch up a few days later. There's heaps of resources as well, so they give you further reading materials, other exercises to try, and there are also live classes as well, so you can watch it in action. Reedsy also have their own online writing tool as well, which I've been kind of dabbling with and trying to explore if that works for me too. And I must say, as someone who has been writing for over 10 years, and I feel like I am a seasoned writer in that sense, I have learned so much from this course, and I think it was really eye-opening. Taking the time to study the craft of writing will actually make you a better writer. I mean, who knew? There's so many key areas I just hadn't considered before when it came to writing. And also what I love about this is there is a wonderful community aspect. So you can get feedback on your writing from other people taking the course, and of course attend those live classes that I spoke about. So Reedsy Learning's next cohort is on the 8th of April, so open from the 8th of April. So there is definitely time to join if you want to kickstart your writing career and write a novel in 3 months. All you have to do is click the link in my bio to sign up, and you'll be taken through to join the next cohort. Huge thanks to Reedsy for working with me on this video. So a few quick fire writing tips just while we're in this section of the video, because as I mentioned, the writing part is definitely the hardest part. So my first tip is that writer's block will be inevitable. Now, you've got to work out your own method of how you avoid writer's block. But I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but writing when you don't feel like it is just part of being a writer. You have to learn how to push through when you're just not vibing with it. That is not to say ignore your body if you're unwell, you're tired, or something's gone on that day that you're just, you know, you need to focus on something else, you know, you need to relax. Fine. But if you're just feeling a little bit lazy, you just need to sit down, you need to get yourself into the right zone and just write even though you're struggling to. With writing a first draft, done is better than perfect. The draft 0, aka this draft you're writing right now, it does not matter if it's not good. It does not matter. You've got to put your perfectionism aside and just focus on getting the words down. So there might be scenes where you're finding it like drawing blood from a stone and you're just really struggling, you don't know how to get it down. Some people advise skipping ahead and writing a scene that you do want to write. So this is another thing. You might not want to write chronologically. I am a chronological writer. It really confuses me when I write later scenes just because like in my head I'm not there yet. But some people really like to write out of order, and you can do this too. One tip that I love giving is if you're really struggling with getting into your story, write a really fun scene that may not even be a part of your story. Sometimes when I'm stuck, I'll just open up a new document and I'll write a kissing scene. I'm writing, it's fun, and it helps you get back to the story in some way. So hopefully you have completed a first draft. A key tip from me also is to look up the kind of target word count of the genre that you're writing in. For example, fantasy novels are going to be longer than a middle grade novel, stuff like that. So just work out what target word count you're really working towards, and of course, this can all be done and addressed in the next step, which is the revision stage. So you have a finished draft. Congratulations. We are now going to tear it apart and analyze it. And this is also a bit where some people love the editing stage, some people hate the editing stage, aka me. Because I am, as I mentioned, a bit of a perfectionist, and usually with my drafts, I like to get them as perfect as possible, even though that's not advisable because you'll be spending ages writing a first draft. But I really don't like the editing stage, which I need to get over. I need to get over it. But anyway, so after completing your first draft, it is time to revise. This is really an opportunity to enhance your narrative. What I really like to do, and I can do a separate video on how to edit your novel, is I like to isolate different areas of your novel and do an edit for each of those stages. So the first edit I kind of like to do is like the more structural edit, the kind of like main plot. For example, are there any scenes that you just didn't really get around to writing in your first draft? Are there any scenes where you were just like, I'm just gonna come back to this later? Now's a good time to add all those in. Also with the structural edit, be really clear. Is this part slowing the pace down? Is this not where it needs to be? Does it need to be a bit earlier on in the book, or does it need to be later on in the book? Really analyze the structure of your book and work out if the beats, the emotional beats of the story are in the right place. I really find what's helpful in this area is reading your book on your Kindle. So sending over to your Kindle or your phone, whatever's easiest. Usually that way you can see the percentage mark of what percentage way of the book you're through. And what I would do, if it's like the 30% mark, or the 50% mark, you've got to have something big dramatic happening there. For example, if you're in the 50% mark of your story and you're like, hang on, where is the midpoint? Where is like any of the juicy scenes that are going to catapult you on to the second half of the book? Go back to your Save the Cat beat sheet, say, you know, look at your other kind of structural outlining tools and just really analyze if your beats are in the right place. So that's part one of the editing journey. Part two, I always find, is characterization. This is always my weakest point, I feel, because my characters are very real in my head, and sometimes I don't put all that down on the paper. Go through your characters, like add in any extra character detail you can, really flesh them out and make them real. The next stage of editing will also be dialogue, making sure the dialogue's really, really great, making it snappier. Reading it out loud is also really helpful for dialogue, just a little tip there. Then once you're happy with the actual plot, the structure, you're happy with the characters, world building as well is a key part of here, so maybe add that if you're kind of doing more of a world building, like fantasy setting. Adding in your world building is key. Like, do you have enough information on the country you're writing on to make it breathe and make it kind of come to life? Finally, your last stage of the editing process will be what we call line edits. So going through line by line, spelling, grammar. Does it need jazzing up a bit? Does it just need to read a bit more exciting? Like, is there another way that you can jazz things up? That is also key. You've also just got to be brutal about your work. Pretend that this is someone else's book. What would you say to them in order to bring out the best parts of the story? I think only then, once you've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, are you able to send it out to the next stage, which in my opinion is beta readers. Now, these beta readers or critique partners are people that you trust who may not be like close to you. They may be like online beta readers or critique partners or fellow writers. Get someone else to read your novel for a second opinion, and when they come back with edits, listen to their edits and don't just completely disregard them if you don't agree, because remember that, of course, everyone has their own opinion on books, but sometimes if the same edits or suggestions keep coming up, maybe you should listen to that, you know? So guys, after that, you should have a finished novel. And then if you want to be a published author, you may be ready to query. and I can help you there because I have a whole video on how to get a literary agent. I will leave that link down below, but do watch that if you want to learn how to get an agent and how to get your novel on the path to publication. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video on how to write a novel. Even if you're a beginner, even if you're a seasoned pro, there might be some useful info here for you. And huge thank you to Reedsy Learning for kindly working with me on this video, for allowing me to be a part of the online novel writing course, which I heartily recommend. I have learned so many amazing tips from there that I am implementing onto my novel I'm currently writing right now. My link to join the next cohort and for you to be a part of the next course is down in my description bar. Please do check it out if you want to have a crash course on writing a novel, and also to write a novel within 3 months, which is amazing. I really appreciate every single one of you. Don't forget to follow me on social media where I'm at BookBellReads, and I'll see you very soon in my next video, guys. Bye.